Okay. How do pandemics end? The last pandemic they thought ended in spring 1919, but it came back. Uh, it ended up with a third of the population catching the virus. At the moment, the comparison for COVID is only 0.5% of the global population has been infected. But what is important is that the districts in the US and in the UK that implemented distancing, hygiene, and social isolation had the least mortality. So that's what we learned. What happened was the H1N1 produced variants became endemic in the population, but the population through infection had acquired immunity. But we're nowhere near that globally, and that has implications, especially in terms of the decisions made by airlines, which I'm going to go into. When I last left you, the prediction was that violence would increase. Open calls for violence. There was an assassination plot against governors who were in Germany, another one in the US, and the Swiss vaccine advisor was kidnapped 6 weeks ago. So violence is going to become part of the vaccination, but that's the least of the problems. There is enormous attacks on people working in the health service. There have been calls for them to be named so that they can be held to trial. So what they're doing is called doxing. That means they publish your address, photographs of you and your children on public, your telephone calls, and as with other things, they bombard you with death threats and abuse, personal and on the internet. Researchers are being intimidated, and it's having a major effect on their mental health. Many of them are scared. So even researchers who normally no one hears about are being doxed by these anti-vax groups. So violence is part of the new spectrum. What's interesting is those spreading anti-vax have not been dealt with by their licensing board. There's a huge amount of money writing ivermectin and chloroquine prescriptions, and you can give out exemptions for against vaccination. They're minting huge amounts of money. It's a very interesting. No action is being taken except against 3, but they went for other things. They're scared. Because they can be sued, and the other side has very good lawyers.
You had to send it.
Meanwhile, the virus is mutating, and these mutants are important. What's important about them is that they're more infectious. Now, there is a popular myth going around that they're less serious, and because they're vaccinated, we're all right. This is not true. I repeat, this is not true. As I'm shortly going to show you data, don't be vaccine happy. These new variants, even some of our treatments are not working. And that's the important information I want. That the virus is mutating, it's becoming more infectious. I certainly have had over 12 of my people in my social circle become infected. I've never seen such high infection rates as I'm seeing now. Now, a lot of people are thinking this is mild infection, it's okay, we're vaccinated, we won't die. Well, you're going to find out this may not be completely true. You have a degree of protection greater than if you didn't get vaccinated, but that's not adequate. And these new sequences and combinations of the virus are quite important. Meanwhile, the political scene is falling apart in the US. They're in complete disarray, and there are elections coming up which they will lose. In Britain, we have the same situation. In Britain, actually, it's worse. They've removed all the air restrictions. So I'm flying to the States next month. Going out, I feel safe because they demand a test for you to get on within 24 hours. Coming back, I have no safeguards. There are no tests. So the British have gone much further to accommodate the anti-vaxxers than the British. And we have the same thing that Trump did. Trump told the the financial marketeers, this is serious, and they sold their shares and made a huge profit whilst they continued to operate.
Mandates on us. You know what? They're pushing this wokeness confusion down our throats now. And by the way, we should try Anthony Fauci and put him in front of a firing squad.
Okay, so it's now become a vaccine slogan. They're not talking about better jobs or improving the economy or services. They're simply running on anti-vax sentiments. They've generated sufficient anger that they can call for the death of investigators. Certainly, I can see a lot of people who worked for the vaccination being subject to investigations, just as Hillary Clinton was. So the violence level is going up. It's becoming a vote-winning thing to be anti-vax, and that's quite important. Now, the evidence is, despite what has been said, that mask wearing, distancing does work. We're already seeing a fifth wave in South Africa, in China. So shall we say we're already seeing it? My guess is next winter, when the Republicans win, things are going to get dramatically worse, and they will have much more power than they currently have. We also must remember that our response to this vaccine and the success of the anti-vaxxers makes us much more vulnerable to the next line in coming. And the current prediction is there's another virus, another pandemic in line. Now, all these lifting of restrictions has occurred, and this is Narada talked about. We're talking about excess deaths. This is the deadliest year in the US in its all-time history. Part of it is due to overdoses, but there's still, even if you remove the overdoses, it's quite significant. If you look at the groups that have fared the worst, the US Hispanic group, now of all the minorities, the ones most likely to support Trump, I'm saying among the minorities and not all of them, are the worst hit. So we have a situation where people are voting for people who would do them the most damage. And as we see in Sri Lanka, we're no longer voting for competent, we're voting on emotion and false information that we've been fed. It's a very successful thing to get people to vote against their own interests, getting turkeys to vote for Christmas. All right, now there's the popular idea that if you get a mild infection, it's a mild disease, don't worry about it. This is a study from the biobank. This is a study from the biobank. They looked at people they had already done scans on. They took the people who were infected, and they're showing reductions in gray matter, and especially in the hippocampal. These are all part of the nasal brain, and they're showing changes in it. And this is especially relevant for us. There are significant changes in cognitive function. So the idea that you get a mild infection, it's nothing, don't worry about it, isn't true, especially for us old people who are already losing brain cells. So COVID is not a neutral infection, even when it is mild. And there's more to it than this. I will come into it in a minute. You all saw the federal judge has said with the greatest number of deaths ever in the history, this is sanitation he ruled on. This has implications. It means that you cannot take any control. You cannot give any advice in a future pandemic. You can't say, take the vaccine or do anything that restricts people. People must be free to do what they like because freedom is paramount. Okay, I'll skip these slides. Now, everybody agrees that if you want to get the economy back, that you have to get the pandemic under control. But so successful has been the push. And there's also a thing called pandemic fatigue. That's a factor. We have now ended up that if all the countries, we think US and Russia are at war, but US and Russia are both combined on how to deal with the vaccine. They're the least vaccinated of any country. And if you look at other countries, More and more people are accepting the vaccination, but in the US and Russia, they're not. Nearly a quarter to a third of the US population is not being vaccinated. And this is because it'll keep a pool of the virus free to mutate and spread and infect others. And as I said in my last lecture, the two biggest producers of fake news on vaccines are the US and Russia. They both use the internet very cleverly, so they will dominate any future response. And especially with the Republicans coming back into power, it'll be a free-for-all. Right, now the GOP isn't just concerned with COVID. They have already passed a law in Idaho for any form of vaccine to be regarded as an assault. So this doesn't just mean COVID, it means measles, it means polio, and they also passed a law in Montana and others for any business or hospital from any vaccine enforcing vaccination requirements. So you now can go and participate in operations if you have hepatitis, because you can't enforce any restriction. These are being passed into law, and this is a triumph for the anti-vaxxers. This is just the beginning. The success with COVID will spread to other vaccines, and this has already happened in Italy. It will be all up to you. So you don't know whether the doctor you're seeing has hepatitis or other infectious diseases that are rescue. To put any restriction on it would be an impairment. As you know, 10% of doctors in the US have not been vaccinated. They have made a nice connection between foreigners and disease. What you need are not vaccinations, but better immigration control. And Biden is making a big mistake on border controls. Now, this is measles, and this is before the vaccine. This is before COVID. As you can see, the anti-vaxxers were strong even before. There have been huge outbreaks, especially in the United States. There have been big ones in Africa and in islands causing numerous deaths. Measles is the next target. And in this case, it's not just really the Trump supporters, the Bernie Sanders supporters, the left wing is very active on all this anti-vaccine stuff too. So it's, as we saw in the French election, the left and the right are combining to prevent any future vaccination. So it's quite ominous. If you're going to treat this as an endemic, which is what happened with flu, with the technology we have, we should be vaccinating children. Nearly 60% of the kids in the US are seropositive, so they've had, but it's mild in young people. The problem is for us. And Israel is doing it, but there's going to be problems with it. So what does it mean for us? It is an idea that COVID deaths and hospitalizations are mainly in the unvaccinated. This picture is changing, and people don't seem to be aware of it. Nearly 2/3 of the people who died from the Omicron surge were 75 and older. So we are, with the new variants, which I covered in short, are a huge risk to us. And contrary to what you're saying, to us, the aged group, the death rate is actually going up. It's going down in young people. So it's good news. The vaccinations have had an effect there. But the vaccinations aren't working for us. And if you look at the actual deaths, what you can see, this is for the elderly. As you can see, the death rate, even among the vaccinations, has now got to 40%. So going around thinking, I'm vaccinated, I'll get a mild infection, I'm all right, is not true. We are not talking about the variants, and the data that's coming in is quite worrying. So getting an infection is no longer just, I'm all right, I'm vaccinated. So what can you do about it? There are 5 treatments available. That's the big change. They've come through with drugs, but this whole thing is changing. For instance, Paxlovid is the one that's most available, and that's what they gave the vice president. A study came out yesterday, and that's how hot this data is, saying it didn't work. So the standard treatments that we have, this is still available in the UK, Zevudi, but the FDA has rejected it on the data they have. Remdesivir has been around a long time, but it's not outpatient, which leaves only this. And we don't have data on whether it works against Omicron variant. There's another one based on immune that the World Health Organization has organized, but I'm not sure how much this is available. And there's a question how, I believe Biden has said these drugs will be available. I don't know how available they're in the UK. The one I saw is only to immune compromised. This is not freely available, though they're claiming it's so, but that's the main one they're going for. And the latest study said it didn't meet the data on hospitalization. So the point I'm saying is a lot of these drugs were tested against Delta. We haven't got data on Omicron. And as I showed you the earlier data, the death rates among us, the elderly, not young people, is significant. So we need to be worried. This is the numbers needed to treat against studies done before. All these, the monoclonal antibodies are not as good. They don't show as good a response. Even if you get serious illness, a lot of these are now under question. So this is now under question, which leads that. And I just want to say, this is my thinking on it. It's completely up to you. This fluvoxamine has the numbers needed to treat around that for inhaled steroids, which is fairly standard treatment currently. This is a systematic review of 3 studies. So fluvoxamine is a drug I'm familiar with. I used it in the 70s. It's a SSRI antidepressant. And it has a number of reasons. We don't have time to go into a number of mechanisms that can be potentially helpful. And there are a couple of studies, especially a Brazilian study, which came out pretty well. So what I have done is I'm going to the States. I don't know what's going to happen. I know New York has a very high infection rate. I've certainly got myself a supply of fluvoxamine. The dose is 100 milligrams TDS in one study, 100 BD in the other. It causes quite a lot of nausea. I'm going for 50 milligrams BD. I think you still need to mask, even if mask is once, or even if when people around you are not being masked. I certainly, when we have get-togethers, get all my family to do tests, and we had to cancel Christmas because my granddaughter's tested positive, and we had to cancel Easter because my son tested positive. So I get people coming for dinners or anything to do the test, ventilate, and continue to be cautious. And you may need to have a strategy. What if you get the infection? Because the data that's emerging is that Omicron may have more, at least that's my reading of it. And my theory is you prepare for the worst and hope for the best. So that's the data I wanted to share with you. It doesn't seem to be publicly available. Okay, I'll stop there.
Thank you, Lawrence. 1 minute. Can you all? Thank you, Lawrence. Any comments, or shall we wait because we got another talk? You raised a whole bunch of questions.
I think for this topic we can just discuss briefly for about 10 minutes.
Yeah. Lawrence, 2 things. Sorry.
Yeah, participating in a Zoom meeting. Shall we have some comments first and then go for the second one?
Yes, I think so. I think Lawrence made a lot of points. Lawrence, yeah. I have 2 or 3 comments listening to you.
Yeah.
Number 1 is I totally agree with your caution. Okay, and I agree with the strategy of even having some of the antiviral medications available with you on hand while traveling. Okay, so no arguments on that. But I think the presentation of, certainly I also agree with you that there's a lot of malignant, ignorant politically based stupidity that's going on. And that actually was one of the reasons for the discussion we are going to have today later about gender identity and prejudice. And I really am at a loss to totally understand the motivation for such evil to happen, but it's happening, okay? And we don't know that. However, I think the presentation that everything is lost and US is going into is going to go into the toilet is a function of the selectivity of the news media. News media only likes to put negative news and bad news and so on, and we sometimes lose our perspectives in that. And this is true of not only COVID, but it's true of all news media at all time, be it the Sri Lankan situation or the Ukraine war or anything. The news media is selective in what they say. So I'm not so pessimistic that all immunization is going, and there is always reaction and counter reaction and so on. So there is still voices of sanity that are still dominant in the US, in my opinion, and even in the UK. So anyway, that's just 3 comments. I won't just 3 comments. I'm not so pessimistic as you are on the outcomes. A little more optimistic. Okay.
Despite all this vaccination story, all my family members have got COVID. Selima got it last week. And of course, the others are younger, but she's the only one who is got that. And if this is so, I think we have to be, I think Lawrence has definitely raised a very important point. No harm in being cautious. No harm in being cautious.
Absolutely. I
And,
totally agree with you.
and we have to be sensible.
Yeah.
And my daughter was very worried that I was taking another vaccine that was forced by the Saudi government, because otherwise I wouldn't have had, my movements would be restricted. In Saudi Arabia, I think they still go on with the checks still, and it is reasonable amount of caution is continuing there. I'm happy about that. And although some of the Middle East countries are giving up, just like the US and the UK. I was surprised that I was not even asked for a PCR when I came to UK 2 days ago.
I mean, UK is the most irresponsible. I mean, I know I've said a lot about the US, but the UK is 10 times more irresponsible in taking off the mask mandate. I forgot to say this judge's ruling in the States is important.
Yeah,
because
it's very important. It is even contested, Lawrence. She's a 35-year-old stupid woman who was put on the bench by Trump. She was judged to be unfit to be a judge by the American Bar Association. She's an ideologically driven Trump supporter who, during the corruption of the whole process during Trump time, got elected. And it's very sad. There's a burden in the system. However, the thing is going to be the question is going to be contested. CDC has decided to contest it, and Justice Department is taking.
In case somebody wants to.
Okay, the problem is the airlines were already pushing for the mask mandate to be dropped. Now, if you look at all the infections, patient 0 came on an aeroplane, but if you study Japan, the US, aeroplanes, only 0.5% of the world's population is vaccinated. Airplanes are the place where you can internationally export a virus. The reason we have a pandemic is because we have east travel. The airlines business is pushing because they've had violence and uptick of violence on planes. So the violence is working. They have demanded that these restrictions be lifted. So don't blame the judge. This is a widely held belief that it should be lifted. In Britain, it used to be very good on the tubes, but now that's been lifted. So this is why I'm saying the victory of the anti-vaxxers. I mean, they've taken it all off. And the places where you gather for travel, and especially airlines, I mean, the airports were pushing heavily to stop it. And as Maruf said, there are no checks coming here. There are checks going out, but no checks coming back. And that's my worry, getting on the flight back here. I'm less worried about the flight going out.
From my personal sorry, go ahead, Lawrence.
Yeah, no, I've finished. Go ahead, Sarah.
I was just going to say I traveled a couple of times in airplanes, and what I did notice to support some of these things that were said here is that the air hostesses are very afraid to confront the passengers who are not obeying the mask mandate. You know, sometimes they just have it on till they slip through, then they take it off, or they just put it on, take it off. But even when passengers complain, the air hostesses do not want to confront because, you know, they've been violently attacked, as was said. So these are some of the problems that we will continue to have, I think.
Yeah, violence works. I mean, I accept what Karunian is saying, but the violence is very cleverly systematized. I mean, that's what you're forgetting, the use of the...
Yeah, but you know, I traveled about 4 times and there was no violence and most people were masked. The point I'm making is the news media points to problems. And in our perception, the problem becomes the dominant behavior. And while it is an aberration of the norms that makes the news, I still think the norm is still the dominant force in most places, in most instances. And so I'm also making a commentary on the absorption, the circulation and absorption and perception that we form on events. So that's a general comment, you know, and that's at all times. So we have to take everything with a grain of salt. I bemoan the corruption of the political culture. It's horrible, and I agree with Lawrence in that. At the same time, I'm not that frightened that common sense and normality won't finally triumph. I don't agree with the statement that anti-vaxxers have triumphed. Anti-vaxxers have made have made a problem. They are a pain in the back, but they haven't triumphed.
I'll give you a personal example. My local church used to give communion only with the priest wearing a mask and sanitizing his hands. After Boris Johnson pulled it off in the face of it, they started just giving communion out. I had to kick up a row, and I'm glad to say they've restored it. So and when I went to Paris, everybody on the tube wore a mask, everybody in the museums wore a mask. Now nobody's wearing it in London. So it's not just, you have to look at the anti-vax movement as something global. Shall we say, the kind of abuse people are getting in hospitals and doctors are getting is quite significant.
Lawrence, but now the latest figures from UK, the infectious rate and the number of infections have gone down tremendously, even after they have removed the masks and the social distancing. So why should we do it? I mean, how long are we going to go on like this?
Okay, the problem with that argument is they've stopped doing tests. I don't know if they've tried getting a lateral flow test. I had to pretend I was still working at the hospital to get my lateral flow test. So if you don't test, yes, numbers will go down dramatically.
Yeah.
And
but the hospital admissions and hospital deaths have gone down, definitely.
Yeah, that's for the young people. That's the data, that's the new data I'm showing you. For those over 70, it's going up, and the Brits haven't broken their data down by age. When you break the data down by age, and that's why we have the American data, it's showing it's going up. This is what I wanted to do. This is why I felt it was important to tell that as a group of elderly people, you need to be aware that Omicron is a very serious threat to us, both cognitively and in terms of health. Yes, general death rates are going down. You need to break it down by age, and then you get the rise in the elderly deaths. And China has recognized this. That's why they're going into lockdown, because they've only vaccinated 50% of the elderly, and they know the death rate in the elderly is going up. So they can't, for them, that's politically unacceptable. That's why they've imposed these extreme lockdowns. So anyone who's looking at the differential death rate, not the total death rate, that's what I wanted to convey today.
No, I don't think anyone will argue with what you have said, your core message, Lawrence, that we have to be cautious, and you are perfectly right. The data doesn't to identify our particular age group risk, and our age group risk still remains high, and the vaccine is far from gone away. And I applaud your caution and what you say for us. So I don't think I don't know whether anyone will question that. Don't let your guard down. It's not gone away.
Thank you, Lawrence, for the caution. And I think we all take that message. I just returned from Holland. The European countries I traveled, they didn't even ask for my COVID vaccination certificate, although I was carrying that as a mandatory requirement. And no one was wearing their mask. So not only in UK, most European countries have also have this theory, as Narada was saying, we got to live with COVID, and all the restrictions are taken out. But I think in doing so, I think your message that over 70, 75 are more vulnerable and the death rate among them is increasing. Whereas in the newspapers in England, they say how much the infection rate has fallen, the death rate has fallen, but they don't give a breakdown as you kindly provided with us today. So we, being in the vulnerable age group, need to be more careful. But what's the point of wearing a mask when all the people around us are pushing and shoving us? In the supermarket, nobody is wearing the mask and no social distancing is being adhered to. So it's very difficult, I would say. Thank you.
Even one-sided masking has some deterrent effect.
Benefit, yeah.
I know,
Yeah.
but not.
It does.
Yes.
I know. I do wear my mask every time I go out in the supermarket, but I get pushed around. But I try even now, try not to go as often as possible. And during the COVID time, we all got our groceries delivered home. But comes a point in time, as Narada said, how long do we go on for? It's a very difficult decision. But I think, thank you for your talk and making it more clear the precautions, or we need to be more cautious. Thank you.
It depends on the type of mask you wear also.
Yeah.
You had to select the ones which prevents coming into you than what you breathe out.
Yeah.
That's the N95s.
Yeah, and SS something.
Yeah. So, General, sorry, any other comments?
There's one question I have. What is the status of the fourth vaccine, the second booster? Is everybody going to take it, or?
I have taken it.
England is giving for over 70s.
Yeah. No, here it's over 55, and I got it as soon as it became available, because I personally think I looked at the data, not in great detail, but overall, and I tend to trust the CDC, and I took it as soon as possible. But unfortunately, the fear of the vaccines, as Lawrence said, has seeped in, and people who have taken the 3 vaccines are also questioning. And there's always news about something that goes wrong, You take the 4th vaccine and a snake bites you, and that makes headline news. So, but why are you hesitating, Bobby?
Now, there is a sentiment that another vaccine is coming. It's better to wait for that. Have anybody?
No.
But they are not gone through the trials yet. You don't know how long it's going to take, because your immunity or antibodies are dropping. That's why they advise you for the 4th one.
Why don't you ask your son? He can have the computer figures and tell you the outcomes. You know?
Yeah.
Okay, there is a debate going on about the fourth vaccine and about T cells. It gets very complicated.
Yeah.
There's an argument under 60 whether it's necessary, and they're challenging the Biden's decision on that. But as far as I'm concerned, I would take it. But measuring antibodies is a very poor measure because a lot of these vaccines were tested against Delta, not against Omicron. And the T cell immunity, which is the critical one, seems to be more lasting longer than the antibodies. But the pattern of infection seems to indicate that antibodies are falling off after 6 months, and that's why we're getting infected. But it also may be due to the variant. The catch is we've had this virus only for 2 years, and we've had the vaccines for less. There's a lot of information. I mean, I was quite shocked at the Paxlovid study because that's what I was planning to get and they haven't released the data. So to see it failing in preventing hospitalization, that's what they gave the Vice President of the United States. So the science is emerging. We're learning as we go, and we may need to be very, very cautious and take everything we've got on a blunderbuss basis. Is my theory on this.
How many of you have taken the fourth vaccine? I have.
We have taken. We have taken.
We have taken it.
Yeah, no, I don't see the negative in that. There's so much.
Lawrence, this I don't know whether you read about a month ago. There's an article to say that Boris Johnson has already ordered 500 million doses of the antiviral drug that is being introduced by one of the pharmaceutical companies. I don't know which one that you showed. You showed about 4 different ones, but which one I don't know. So now that we are having enough antiviral drugs, it doesn't matter people going around. If they go into hospitals, they can get the antiviral drugs.
But that's the catch. Paxlovid, which is the #1 that they've gone for, the Pfizer, failed in a study. And all these drugs were tested on, and that's the same problem with the monoclonal antibodies. They were tested on Delta. We don't have, what's clear is the variants are beginning to play a different role. So there are some, I mean, Paxlovid, which is the main drug, has failed in the latest study.
But the difficulty caused by masking is a constructed and exaggerated one.
Yes.
It is not a big deal. It is the nature of the information and mind control that goes on. And your argument, Narada, is totally goes against what Professor Abhiratna taught us. Prevention is better than cure. and if Pachaya was here, he would be turning in his grave. So
you know, I will tell you my personal experience. Now, I had three of the vaccines. All 3 were Pfizer. And I went to Sri Lanka in December, just after Christmas. And in February in Sri Lanka, I got COVID. I got, probably it was the Omicron, because, you know, I was ill only for, not even ill. I mean, I had body aches and pains and felt feverish for just 1 day. And of course, in Sri Lanka, the regulation is you have to isolate for 14 days. I didn't do that. On the 3rd day, I got into a 3-wheeler and went to Grandpa's. You know, by the 4th day, everything was normal. And about the 6th day, I tested myself. I was completely clear. So I wasn't worried about Omicron. Omicron was so mild. And so far, most of the people I know who have got Omicron, they have had very mild infections.
Okay, I've had a friend who's been in ICU twice now in the last month.
with Omicron?
With Omicron. So this is what I'm saying. The death rates are starting, the toxicity rates are starting. Most people will have, as you say, a mild infection. But especially as you get older and if you have diabetes, heart disease, then you're at risk. And the risk is certainly going up. That's why one needs to check. But vast majority of people will have what's a mild infection. But the long-term effects, we won't know. I mean, after the 1919 flu, the neurological effects weren't evident for 2 years. This is a more complicated process than we think, and we're learning as we go.
If you take a choice between vaccine and drugs, I'll go with vaccine. The reason is, drugs, we do not know what the effects are. And some of these antiviral drugs, long-term effects, we do not know. And I think we cannot depend on drugs alone. And I think vaccine also, I mean, you have to take prudently. But definitely Omicron, I agree with Narada that it was mild in some people. And I had it, and I didn't have much of a symptom at all. But I think we have to be, what Lawrence has brought is the main word, one word, caution, and that's it. And we don't need to depend on drugs for that. And I believe that is a better way. If it is a necessity to take the vaccine, no harm in taking it.
I think you're right. It's caution, and one is not against. You can take the vaccine, you can take the drugs, you can put the mask, you can socially distance, and all of that we should practice. And we shouldn't lose patience, and we shouldn't throw caution to the winds. Yeah. So, friends, I think we've had a very, very useful and very pertinent and very interesting discussion. I think that the subject of sex will be a little. My talk is about 20 minutes, and it's pretty heavy, and heavy in the sense it's technical. And Lawrence, I think, is going to do more things. The reason why we thought about this subject was for the same reason that Lawrence talked about. There's so much stupidity and prejudice and politicization and really cruelty going on the issue of gender identity. Okay, with the new Supreme Court, and Bobby lives in Texas. In Texas, if you give hormones for gender transition, it's a criminal act. Okay, and it's becoming stupid, but it's a discussion by itself. And my suggestion is that we don't take it today, but postpone it for the next month, unless we have something else more interesting. What do you think on that? You want to go through another hour of this?
No,
I think since
I think
we said we were going to have this, and I told so many other people to join because of that. They joined because of that.
I know, but Lawrence wanted to make this
important
announcement. Okay. Yeah. So, do you want to go ahead?
Go ahead.
I think it's already 1 hour gone, so I think we'll go. I think we should go for the more interesting subject of sex.
You want to go for the sex?
Yeah.
Huh? It'll take another 30 minutes, and then Lawrence has a whole.
Let me make one comment about sex, that it is the most unacknowledged knowledge.
I think we should go for it, Arun, since it's on the agenda.
All right. I'm ready with my slides. I hope you guys don't get bored after all this discussion. And Maruf overhyped it. You're not going to see pornography or anything like that. This is hardcore science. But okay. Then can we start, Maruf? Then I'll share a screen.
You can share the screen now.
Okay,
just
all right.
Click on the green button and then.
Okay, so Lawrence, is Hillary going to join us?
Yes.
Do you want to get her in, and so that she can say what I'm going to say?
She'll come. She's working on something, so I'll call her. Yes, Hillary. Okay, you start. She'll come. She knows.
Okay, give me 1 second to get my slide in.
Arunian is starting his talk.
She doesn't know to know. Okay.
Huh? I think a psychologist.
Why don't you call me if there's anything I can contribute?
Okay, I'll call you for the discussion.
Okay, can you see the slides now?
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Lawrence,
Okay,
Yeah.
so you know what?
It's
Can you see me, right? Can I go on?
Yes.
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 Yeah, one second. 1 minute. My wife wanted to join. Let me ask you. You can see it. Okay, all right, fine. So the subject is sex, gender, and society. Okay, and what we're going to talk is under sex. We are going to talk about the process by which undifferentiated ovum, a bunch of cells, either become a male or a female. And the purpose of going through that process is to tell you how fragile and how that process can get modified, changed, and mixes come in. And that's one thing. And the second one is gender. And when we talk of gender, we are talking about the identities and behaviors of males and females as transgender, homosexual, heterosexuals, because these people have, it's a reality, they exist amongst us. And the question is, are they sinful people, or are they distorted or perverted people? And that's the questions that I think Lawrence and Hilary are going to talk about. And society explores the response of society to these gender identities. In many countries, it's punishable by death, and they are accepted by a large majority. At least in the US, many of them are accepted. We have become more tolerant and more inclusive, but others are rejected and marginalized and exploited by the society. So those are the areas of discussions. But just to go forward from I want to just tell you that my interest in this started when I was a fellow in endocrinology at Yale in 1974, when much of the measurements of hormone became available. Endocrine became a subject only in the 70s after the techniques to measure small quantities of chemicals, the hormones, became widely available with the radioimmunoassay invention. And so I was at a time when people are understanding more and more, and we were beginning to understand many of these stuff. And when I started in 74, homosexuality was classified as a disease by the psychiatrist. And since then, lots of information and lots have developed. I must say that there's huge bunch of knowledge which I haven't kept up with. So mine is a little basic sort of stuff, which I learned mostly in the 70s, and I practiced a little bit. But there are lots more that I won't be touching because I really don't know most of the time. Okay, but there are 5 different areas in which you define sex. One is the chromosomal sex. You all know that XX or XY.
Karin,
Yeah.
Karin,
Yes.
make a slide bigger showing. Click on the show. The button that I showed you. No, the next one on the right.
That one?
Yeah.
Next one.
Oh, okay. Oh, okay. Sorry.
Yeah.
Sorry, gentlemen. Can you see it now?
Yeah, good.
Okay, all right. So as I said, there are five domains of sexual differentiation. One is the chromosomal sex, and then the gonadal sex, either ovaries or testes, but also lots in between, I see. And then the internal ducts. Males and females have different internal ducts. The males have what develops from the Wolffian duct, vas deferens, and the females have what develops from the Mullerian ducts, fallopian tubes, and of course the external genitalia, which is the one on which the sex is assigned to a person. And then finally, a thing called psychosexual orientation, which is also developed and is certainly hormonally influenced and maybe develops over a period of time, unlike the external genitalia and the internal ducts, which all happens mainly during the period of the embryo intrauterine. Okay, so that's that. Now, 1 minute. Okay, so this is, I got this slide from Lawrence's thing. I just want to let you know that every person has a assigned sex. That's what you're called, you're a boy or a girl at birth, and a gender identity, which develops later. And it's not always that the assigned sex and gender identity are the same. So some people who are called males may feel female, and some people who are called females may feel male. And that's part of the confusion that comes in the world. Okay, just to put that. And then and then how sex differentiates in the embryo is given here. The chromosomal sex is established at fertilization. And then that chromosomal sex involves a series of events by which the sexually indifferent gonad becomes, there is a place in the embryo called the mesenchymal tissue, which is undifferentiated. And in the presence of a Y chromosome, that undifferentiated area becomes a testis. So the indifferent gonad becomes a testis or ovary based on the presence or absence of the Y chromosome. If there is no Y chromosome, like if there is no Y chromosome, then that particular area becomes an ovary. So females are the default sex of the embryo. Of the embryo. Okay. In other words, to become a male, you have to have a testosterone secreted. In the absence of testosterone being secreted, you become a female. So that's why I think the biblical story is a little wrong. They say God created Adam, and then Eve was an afterthought. In nature, it seems that Eve is the bottom line, fundamental way in which world goes, and Adam is an afterthought because of testosterone. Okay, and that's a little comment I may have. But this is the Y chromosome, and there's a region in the Y chromosome that is the sex determining region, and it's called the SRY gene. And I may make a side comment that this SRY gene is common among all mammalian males, and mammalian females don't have it. So there's something that rats and males have in common that the males and females don't have in common. So our spouses, my wife doesn't have a gene that I have in common with the rat. So that's another part of our very male rat, and female rats are both in the same thing. Okay. So again, I want to make a point that the testes secretes the testosterone, which directs the development of the fetus to become a male infant. In the absence of testosterone, the fetus develops into a female. And the first signs of sexual differentiation can only be seen around the 6 weeks. And this is important because the development of the brain with regard to the sexual orientation happens at a different time. It happens at a little 8 weeks time. So it's not the impact of the hormones in different time slots. Okay. So this is just a schematic presentation of what I just told you. Okay. There is an indifferent gonad, and you have an XY gene, and that causes a testes, and the testes secretes two kinds of hormones. One is a testosterone, and the testosterone, it's a little more complicated than the simple thing. There are 3 or 4 different kinds of androgens, but long and short of it, the testosterone gets the structures of the fetus to become a male genitalia with the scrotum and the phallus and all that. And then there is the Sertoli cells in the testes, if you remember your anatomy, that secretes a hormone called the anti-Mullerian hormone that prevents or inhibits the formation of the fallopian tube. So for instance, I have had a patient who had a male patient, looks male, had a little abdominal issues, and then they opened up, they found that he had fallopian tubes. And what has happened in that particular child, was that the Mullerian hormone for some reason did not secrete. So he had a Mullerian duct and a vas deferens and a male testicular character. So that's a bit of a mix, because this is a specific hormone that is needed to suppress the formation of the Mullerian duct. Now, in the absence of the XY genetic sex, you get the ovaries, no anti-Mullerian ducts, no testosterone, and they became female. Okay, so that's the science of it. Okay, and so now this is the same thing I am depicted in more pictures. And the main point of this slide is that we have analogous structures. Males and females have analogous structures. And so the hormonal milieu determines which structure becomes the final dominant structure. So we are very, very similar in characteristics. So, you know, when you ask who is a male, who is a female, we have very, very similar milieu, and yet we are different. And that's the marvelous miracle of nature, that when you look at it from this point of view of differentiation. Okay. And this slide is similar to the earlier slide, but this has to go a little more into the notion of gender identity. Okay. You have the genetic sex, gonadal sex, testes or ovaries, and the gonads produce a hormone during fetal development, which brings to the sexual differentiation that I told you about. And also the hormones go to sexual differentiation of the brain. And this sexual differentiation of the brain temporally is at a different time. It's a little later. Okay. And then the hormonal, the sexual hormone during the fetus, and also there's hormones at puberty. Puberty, the final gender identity is not purely at the point of birth and is not all intrauterine, but also happens later on, and puberty is an important time. And then secondary sexual characteristics develop, and then finally you get your gender identity. So it's a very complicated, long-run, highly coordinated process that happens to make a male, a female, and everything in between. And this slide has only one point, and that is there are anatomical differences between the brains of males and females. Okay, both in hypothalamus and the way it works. I am not sure about all the exact functions. And also in the frontal lobe, the limbic system in women are bulkier, and the parietal cortex in males are bigger. And these are structural differences in the male brain and the female brain. And what the functional correlates, I don't know. I leave to neurologists or psychiatrists. But the main point is males and females have different structures that are generally identified. Okay. So then we go again to go back and go into the domains of sexual differentiation. We went to chromosomal, gonadal, internal, external, and all that, and then the psychosexual orientation. And if you really look at it in life, and this is in my clinical practice and what I have practiced with, okay, you will find that there is unclear a range of conditions at each one of these domains. For instance, chromosomal sex, there's XX or XY. That's what we think there is. But there's also XXY. This is the Klinefelter syndrome. Because there's a Y, he gets out as a male, okay? Or there's XO, there's one X chromosome missing, that's a Turner syndrome. And they're also human beings, they're also patients, they're also people. How do we class them? Do we call them abnormal, or do we call them different? Do we at one time, people with black skins in southern part of the United States were called abnormal? Or do we call them human beings, part of the spectrum? So that's the attitudinal issues that we have to deal with. But the point I'm making, there's a spectrum of people. So it is with gonadal sex, okay? You have ovaries and testes. But all in between, there is some people who have ovaries and testes together because of inadequate expression of it. And there are some people without gonads, okay? And then same with the internal ducts. I told you about the case of a patient I had, but there are mixtures at all time because all this is dependent on a particular set of hormones acting at a particular time and being able to act on it, okay? And then of course, the external sexual sex characteristics, which you call ambiguous genitalia, where it is difficult to assign a sex of a baby. And I've clinically dealt with such cases. And sometimes you can assign it and you find that genetic sex and the external genitalia are different. Now, if it is caused by inadequate testosterone production or action, generally male. So if in a genetic male, there's something that goes wrong with the production of testosterone, your genitalia will be ambiguous. It won't be clearly a male genitalia. Or if excess testosterone is produced because of sorry, but if excess testosterone is produced in a genetic female, again you'll have ambiguous genitalia. Okay, and then and the final is, you know, psychosexual orientation. This is the thing that makes the political news in the society: homosexual, transgender, heterosexual identities. And I have treated people who are transgender. They are wonderful people. I can tell you, they are good human beings. And I feel sorry for them that they are not understood very well. But that's the biological range. So the bottom line message is, I made the point, causes of ambiguous external genitalia is inadequate testosterone production or action in a male, or excess androgen in a female fetus results in ambiguous genitalia. Okay. So now, I just want to make this point. This is the way steroid hormones are produced. Okay, all steroid hormones starts from cholesterol, you know, which we have all got very anti-cholesterol as old as statin users and all that. But cholesterol is essential, and cholesterol gets to this is actually in the adrenal gland, but the aldosterone, mineral hormone necessary for salt retention and salt balance, is produced from this. And then another from the progesterone, it goes on this line. You can see the screen, right? You can see my cursor, right? And it goes to become testosterone, okay? And from progesterone, it becomes testosterone. And there are other kinds of testosterone: DHEA, dehydroepiandrosterone, androstenedione. These are all testosterone, different kinds of testosterone, androgens, similar kind of androgens, okay? Now, two or three different points here, okay? Number one, there are people in whom this enzyme, the 21-deoxycortisol, is deficient. Okay, all 11-deoxycortisol deficient. There are enzymes can get deficient. If that happens, there is no cortisol, and therefore ACTH is secreted in a high amount, and it results in an excessive production of testosterone. And you get and if it's a female, you get a female with a very high androgen level in the utero, and these people have ambiguous genitalia. They are females with male-looking genitalia. I'll show you a picture of that. And the second point I want to make, that both males and females have both testosterone, androgens and estrogens. You know, we have different balances, and the estradiol is produced from the testosterone. Female hormones are produced through the male hormones. Okay, so you can see that it's just there's one additional step in the females to produce the estradiol. So there's the internal milieu of females and males have a lot in common and a lot different. And the minor differences make the difference in our appearance, in our orientation, and all these kinds of things. So the basic point I want to make is that, you know, we not only between males and females, but even all mammalian and all animal species, biologically, if you look at it, we have a lot of similarities, and the differences are there, and we live and differentiate and identify ourselves with the differences. But there's also commonality, and we are all very, very closely intertwined. Is the basic thing. So I just want to go through this fast. All these are intersex conditions where there is a mixture of things. I don't want to go through each one. There are a huge number. I only brought few of late on congenital adrenal hyperplasia. I mentioned about it, Klinefelter syndrome. There are females with excess X genotype, 3X chromosomes, Turner syndrome, and goes on. I don't want to go through that, but all these are clinical conditions we deal with where there is intersex. No, it is not a clearly X and Y and a male and a female as we conceptualize. But these people, how do we view them? Are they sick people or are they different people? And these are fundamental philosophical and attitudinal questions that we have to answer. So I want to just conclude this and give you two examples, and I'll stop. You know, all biological features in humans are expressed in a continuum of differences and similarities. So it is a continuum that we have to really deal with. most undifferentiated embryos become male or female, but a small number differentiate as intersex babies and cannot be neatly categorized as male or female. Okay. Then a similar continuum is seen in psychosexual differentiation. There are males, females, bisexuals, heterosexuals, homosexuals, and so on. And I just want to make the similar point that this is similar to all other biological features: skin color, height, reading, mathematical ability, whatever functional and physical characteristics are all in a range of continuum and in a range. And we got to recognize this as a society if you want to become a more humane, inclusive society. Because unfortunately, I want to just give you a few examples. How many of you recognize, okay, let me ask you, if you were called to the delivery room and you had a baby like this, what would you say? What is the genetic genotype of this newborn baby? Any guesses?
Male.
Male? Okay,
Female.
Huh?
Female.
Why do you say that, female or male?
Male, because of the right side picture. There is something similar to a scrotum.
Scrotum, okay.
Scrotal sex, scrotal, yeah.
How many say male? No one, only Maruf. Okay. Okay, so this is a child with a 21 hydroxylase deficiency. Is a XX female, but had excess androgen in the utero, and is a female. And the child also had salt loss, was hyponatremic, has electrolyte balance because they also don't produce a mineralocorticoid, the aldosterone. So this child really had to be treated with cortisol, which suppressed the ACTH levels and brought down the androgen level, and slowly this transformed, and sometimes they need some surgical correction. But this is a female child, and this female child can function as a female and totally capable of having children later on as they go through puberty. So this is the impact of androgens in the male. Okay, all right. So that's number one. How many of you recognize this lady?
Excuse me.
That's a male.
Huh?
It's a male.
Oh, all right. You know,
Who said it's a male?
Benita.
Benita? Okay, Benita.
Yeah.
Why do you say it's a male?
The facial features is more masculine, I think, still. Even though she looks like a lady dress, the face is more masculine. That's all.
Well, you know what NCAA is, Benita?
I don't know. I don't know.
That is the National Collegiate Athletic Association. That is the international US University Athletic Championship. And she just won the female swimming title.
Yeah.
She became first in the 500-yard swimming. Okay. Either the people in the US will have seen it. Her name is Leah Thomas. Okay. And she thinks she's a female. Okay. But we have some wonderful governors in the southern part of the state. One is in Bobby State of Texas. Another is in Florida. There's a fellow called Ron DeSantis, who I think is has a little bit of a devil incarnate in him. But Ron DeSantis decides that she should not be the champion because she's a transgender female. So she's a female. She was assigned the sex of male, okay, but she never felt a male, okay, and she decided that she was a female and went through hormonal treatments and transgendered herself into become a female, and she competed and won. So the controversy is so she feels she's a female. She always has felt she's a female. Her initial body structure was that of a male. Okay. So the question is, should she be allowed to compete as a female? And that's a little more complicated question than the question of should she be accepted as a female? because I'll ask a question, who decides what my sex is? If I say tomorrow that I am a female, can you say I should not? So that's an interesting question. You can say, I can't get a vaccine.
Your wife will decide. Your wife will decide, Karunit.
Yeah, okay, but can my wife decide for me? You know, that's the difference. I'm not talking, but the point is, these are the questions that come up as a result, and we got to think of our societal thing. But anyway, she's Leah Thomas, she's in the headlines, very famous, and I think it's going. But Florida, the number 2 girl was from Florida. So DeSantis publicly said I don't accept a victory, and she gave the victory to the girl from Florida. Interestingly, NCAA is aware of it, and what they do is they suppress the male hormone because performance is said to be due to the amount of androgens. So if a male who wants to become a female is suppressed, hormonally suppressed for 1 year, then they are allowed to compete as a female. So it's a controversial thing. We'll talk about it. It's a very controversial subject. But anyway, these are the difficulties that are caused by simplistic ideas. Now I want to stop with this story. This is a lady called Santi Sangurajan. She is from Tamil Nadu, came from an extremely poor family. By the way, she won 12 international medals in the middle distance runner in the 1970s. And she won 50 national medals, okay, competing as a female. And, you know, if you look at her, you know, you can be prejudiced, but, you know, she does have breast tissue, okay. She has breast tissue, and I don't know it, but anyway, I'll tell you more about the possible clinical things that I know from my practice. But she passed off as a female. She was born into an extremely poor family in a village in South India, in the district of Tamil Nadu. And she grew up in a very small hut. She was in a very poor environment. There was no bathroom, no outhouse, there was no running water, there was no electricity. The parents were very poor. But she grew up as a female in that village. In that village was not very sophisticated, and she was malnourished as a child. But she overcame all that and became a very prominent middle distance runner. And in 2006, she came second in the Asian Championship in Doha, in Qatar, clocking 2 minutes, 3.166 seconds. So she was a gold medalist in the Asian competition. However, in the 80s, there was some awareness of sexual things. She underwent a test, and she was just told that she does not possess the sexual characteristic of a woman. And she was stripped of her title. And she went through a lot of difficulty. You know, the Olympic Association told her that she can't run, that she's not a woman. And this is after growing up as a woman. And she returned humiliated, and she tried to kill herself and all that. But anyway, the story does end up well because she didn't get the money that she was supposed to get as a medalist and so on. But what she had was a thing called androgen insensitivity syndrome. Okay. So if you take this lady, she has XY chromosomes. She has very high levels of testosterone. I mean, I have had 2 patients with this, and they both came with primary amenorrhea. Okay. We call it also testicular feminizing syndrome. And actually, a lot of very attractive females are said to have this syndrome, including 1 or 2 famous people. Kim Novak, I don't know if you know who she is. Kim Novak, actress. So Kim Novak was during my time, they said it, I don't know who the hell she is, but she's an actress, apparently very attractive. She's supposed to have testicular feminizing syndrome. And what they have here is they have insensitivity to testosterone. Because of a testosterone receptor in the cells, they have high levels of testosterone, but the testosterone cannot act. So it doesn't have the effect of testosterone. But the testosterone gets aromatized or changed into estrogen. And the estrogen causes the breast tissue development and the other female characteristics development. But they don't have a uterus, so they don't have a menses. So they come with primary. The 2 patients I saw both came as normal females functioning normally in school, but they came with primary amenorrhea. So it's an interesting issue, and this is a very famous case in India. It took a lot of publicity, so I thought I would say that. So moving from the biology to the area of society, you know, Saro mentioned it last time. A senator, one of our less bright senators, I would say, asked this future very outstanding lady, in my opinion, Judge Kettle Brown Jackson, during the Senate confirmation hearing, a big public hearing, if you know what a Senate Supreme Court Judge confirmation hearing, asked the question to ask her to define a woman. And Judge Jackson said, I can't define a woman. There is no legal definition of a man or woman. And so that became a point of talking point to all the Republicans who derided her and say, you want to have a Supreme Court judge who can't define a woman. Okay. So now, you know, can you define a woman? And I said, first of all, who defines a man or woman? Who defines Leah Thomas? Is it Leah Thomas or one of us? Is it the individual or the state? That's a very interesting question. And then in the context of the question, you know, this is important because of the transgender question, which has become political and laws are coming into this. Okay? So this is one area of public debate. Okay. Now I will stop. Now in Texas, where Bobby lives, treatment of gender dysphoria. Gender dysphoria is where a person is unsure of what the sex is criminalized. Should it be criminalized? And this is all medical groups accept that this is proper treatment of people, otherwise they go into depression, but it's criminalized. So this is another thing. These are all political ploys that have come. Does the individual have the right to change his or her sex, or is it, should the state know? Should the state define the patient's gender, or should the individual define? Okay. And then of course we come to this, should a marriage commitment between two people of the same sex be given the same legal and societal recognition as that of people of different sex? This is a huge debate in the US, and the US has decided they do have the right to have the same marriage, same rights. But there are a lot of people who are opposing it, and the story is that with the new Supreme Court, that may get changed. Okay. By the way, the studies shown, there's one New York Times article that showed that marriages between gay couples are far more stable and loving. There are less divorces than among heterosexual couples. So in case one wants to look at marriage, and is denying services to a gay couple based on a person's individual belief considered an act of discrimination or expression of religious freedom? It's a long subject. I have strong opinions on that. I don't want to go into it. But these are all questions. In Florida, there is a bill saying that you can't say gay in primary schools. And it's all political, but and the school book contents are being altered. So this difference is very, very political and difficult. Societies are not dealing with it, at least as I think they should deal with it. So are there only two agenda identities, or are there only male and female, or are there more? Are these assumptions supported by biological evidence? So these are all questions. Is the identity other than a male and female unnatural, or is learned from the environment? These are all assumptions. I'm just going in. And are homosexual relations perversion? Does gay marriage impact the society negatively? Are there sociological evidence to say gay marriage is negative? So I'll stop at that. Okay. Now I'll stop. I think I made my point. Okay. I'll stop at that and let Lawrence take over. And this is all Maru's addition. Sex will be good again. Okay. Thank you for the hopeful things. Okay. And these are Maru's additions, some webs that can help us find good sex. And I don't know what is in the bag. I haven't looked at it yet. But life goes on nevertheless. Okay. But thank you. Thank you very much. And thank you, Maru, for embellishing all these slides. I must say that it is Maruf who put all the additional embellishments to the slides. So I hope I have, I think should we listen to Lawrence before we ask any questions, if you have any questions?
I want to make a as a gynecologist on the side of the women. I think very importantly, we have gene, anatomy, and actually the expression of eventual expression. But it's important. You said in one of the slides, you said women don't produce androgens. They do.
No, they do, of course. In fact, it is said that libido in women is modulated by androgens.
Yeah, very vital.
So,
because
I didn't say that much. What I said is
no.
androgens are produced from testosterone, and women have plenty of androgens. Yeah.
The androgens of the men are the way makes the women have the libido.
Yeah. No, it is not androgens of men. Men have androgens and estrogen. Women have estrogens and androgens, and the libido function in women is said to be from the androgens.
Also, there can be an abnormal development like hair and abnormal hair in the face.
Polycystic ovarian disease. I didn't go into that. There's a whole bunch of, polycystic ovarian disease, which we used to call Stein-Leventhal syndrome during our time.
As far as it takes a law. And then there's another very interesting YouTube. You can go and see male and female brains, how they work. It's totally different. And the thinking, the way they behave, and that's how there is love between man and woman. Initially.
Okay, sorry. Sarah, go ahead.
Also, and debates. But anyway, I was going to add one more thing to the website. These more of a, not really fun, but there was a movie called The Danish Girl. Eddie Redmayne acted in it a long time ago, but it showed the extent to which someone would go through to get their organs changed, the number of surgeries this person went through. I don't know if anyone else has seen this movie or heard about it or knows much. I saw the movie.
I've seen it in reality. Professor Ratnam used to do this transgender, and you see, walk into his office and you see beautiful women sitting out there. And then if you, you see one of the ladies goes to the secretary and says, "Can I go to the bathroom?"
I have treated patients, not too many patients. Mainly the patients I have had are males who have become females, and they are very well stable, nice people. And I give them estrogens, and also I follow the Endocrine Society guidelines. And part of it is to also do a prostate-specific antigen. Female. So it's a very complicated story, and we shouldn't simplify it and call it in the realm of black and white. But yes, Saro is right. I've seen patients who've gone through various mutilating surgeries, males to become females.
We have one eye surgeon, current eye surgeon, who had a sex change.
Professor Ratnam, Sri Lankan.
Yes, in Sri Lanka.
No.
One of the consultants.
He was the president of the FIGO, and he is one of the obstetricians who was world famous for transgender, and he does very beautifully. He does operations.
Okay. All right. Any other comments? So in Bobby's country, if you give hormone suppressive therapy, you go to jail. We'll come to that. I'm just amazed at the politicization and stupidity that goes on. Lawrence talked about COVID, but it happens in this also. It's become a culture war. It's a political thing. It's a sad thing.
So,
anyway,
Karuni, the same-sex marriages they seem to be much more loving and bonded, but it is a short span of study, isn't it? How long have they had that study?
I don't know the duration of the study. I only saw one article in the New York Times.
I also thought that.
But what's that? Sorry.
I also felt it must be very short. There are so many heterosexuals in millions of years now, but now only you have seeing this, so they can't sort of. Sorry to interrupt, but the numbers.
There are long-term studies going back to the 70s, so that's not new.
I see.
Yeah, and I
And
think
sexual satisfaction is higher in homosexual relationships, especially lesbians, than in heterosexual relationships. The level of sexual satisfaction is much higher.
How do you assess that?
Well, there are scales for orgasmic levels of orgasm. There are also measures, physiological measures that Masters and Johnson did. So both those data match for sexual satisfaction is much higher, especially for women.
Interestingly, in ultrasound, you can around 15 to 16 weeks is the first time you can see that real change from between a male and a female genitalia, and because that's the time the penis starts forming, and you can see the scrotum and things like that. Before that, it is very, very. If you look at the bottom of the baby, it is very similar to each other, male or female.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So in cryptorchidism, when you have the cryptorchidism also, it will be the same. No?
Yeah.
No. There are cryptorchidism is a failure of total masculinization.
I know, but the scrotal sac is still shrunken.
No. You know, there are a number of medical conditions, and it's a thing. But what I'm saying is there are analogous structures in males and females, and then they get differentiated into what become males and females on the basis of the hormonal milieu. Okay, and if the hormonal milieu is faulty because the production of the hormone involves so many enzymes going through, and it happens, and there are distortions, more testosterone or less testosterone, then you have a different result. And cryptorchidism is one of those inadequate, some masculinization process failed. I don't know exactly what, and it could be it may not be in the hormone, but it may be in the cell structure. All kinds of different things can happen. Yeah. But the fact that we question, it is a difficult thing in human societies to be inclusive. On the one hand, all philosophies, Bible certainly is extremely strong on inclusiveness, even though there are parts which are interpreted differently. And I think all religious philosophies talk about humanity as one, but yet, you know, if there's a book that I would recommend all of you to read, it influenced me a lot. It was a book written in 1958 called The Nature of Prejudice. And actually, it's what I learned from that is worth a lecture. The phenomenon of prejudice, the positive facts or aspects of it, why it survives, and the negative aspects of it. So we all have prejudices, we all have our groupings, we all have boundaries, and we all say this is inclusion, that is outside. Okay. And sometimes positively, sometimes negatively. For instance, I think a Republican Trump supporter is outside my realm of inclusion, but a black homosexual is inside my realm of inclusion. So I also have my own prejudices that way, I suppose. But it is how we treat these transgender intersex folks, because I've seen them as patients, I think is wrong as a society. We should include them. The mere question that you question a study that says hey, homosexuals are as happy as a heterosexual does signify a little bias in our thinking. We wouldn't say that if you say that we or some others see heterosexual marriages are superior because that's the normal we think. So there's a concept of normal too. Anyway, I'm giving you my philosophy.
I think we can go on with Lawrence, Hillary.
Lawrence?
I mean, it's 4:44. it'll take about half an hour, 20 hours, and it's going to be, of course, be much more controversial given the questions asked, because I'm dealing with homosexuality and other things. And
We can have a lecture by itself. Do you want to put it off?
Yeah,
I mean,
I think let's put it off, because I'm doing religion and homosexuality, which is going to be fairly explosive. So I think, and these questions, you know, homosexual versus heterosexual relationships. I mean,
we can have a sex part too.
The second time round, yeah.
Or 3 years.
obviously, you have to market it better, Maruf.
Marketing better.
You need a younger audience for that.
Yeah, I think so.
It's a sign of falling testosterone levels.
No, I think, give me 1 second. Please, yeah, you'll take it. Okay, all right, okay. Sorry. So no, I think, I don't know how many of you are interested in this rather esoteric subject, which I happen to jump into because of my specialty. But I think Lawrence is I would also think it's good to put up. What do you think, Narada? How many of you are to continue?
I think we'll postpone it. We don't have to wait for the whole 1 month, 4 weeks. We can have a halfway through the month, one on.
No, don't do that.
I'm going away.
Okay.
You have to come and get up at 1 a.m. in the morning.
No. What I mean is, today, of course, I think it's a bit too late to go on for another 40 minutes. So we'll have another a meeting. Either we wait for the 4 weeks, or if everyone is agreeable, we can have it a little bit earlier.
I'm away middle of next month. I'm in the States.
So right, okay.
We'll put it for the next session. So it's just
Lawrence, where are you coming? Where are you coming, Lawrence?
I'm coming to New York.
Okay, all right. Okay.
By the way, sorry.
Sorry. Go ahead, Sarah.
Yeah. By the way, I'll be coming to London too. Gauri, I'll be in touch with you.
Yes.
Gauri, are you there? Yeah. So
Saru, when are you coming?
When are you coming?
Planning to be there between like May. I mean, we are landing there May 3rd. I'll be there.
That's very soon.
May 3rd to May 13th.
May 3rd.
So I'll try and be in touch with you guys. See if I can get you guys over for a cup of tea or something.
Yeah.
Okay. So the people I know who are there, I'll try to send out an email.
The chairman of the London. Nara is the chairman of the London group.
Okay, so I just wanted to throw that in there.
Okay.
The other thing I was going to say, just a comment, was that, you know, among the African Americans, especially, homosexuality is really viewed as one of the absolute no-nos. It's a real crime. And we are reading a book called The Prophet at the moment. And that dealt a lot with the fact that since males were used mainly to produce more children, so when people were homosexual, the slave owners' the purpose was lost. They would not have sex with the women, and so they could not produce children as they wanted, and they were severely punished. I don't know whether some of those thoughts also, you know, come through to the present day.
So,
but there are a number of reasons. The different communities treat it differently. In many countries,
created the eunuchs. Remember, Sarah, they created the eunuchs to knock off the.
Right.
No, that is eunuchs was created in the Middle Ages and so on and so forth.
Middle Ages, so in the other way.
Middle Ages, in the Dark Ages, eunuchs were created so that the king had service of males and was not at a risk of getting an heir to the throne, who would contest his son. So
and they would be safe around the women, right?
Yes, safe around the women.
Safe around the women too. Yeah.
So
that Lawrence will get into more of that, but I just wanted to say that more than religion, there are other things too that maybe affect the
religion too is extremely complicated. For instance, I can talk as a Christian, The evangelicals in particular, you know, and they have a distorted version of Christian, at least. I don't, frankly, they lost a lot of the essence of the religion. As happens in every religion. I think political Buddhism in Sri Lanka, the Hinduism in India, and Islam in many countries, all religions have these collective tendencies to become intolerant and lose the core of the essence of the religion. And that's not unique to Christianity, nor is it unique to any Buddhism, Hinduism, Islam. All are guilty of that. Even fundamental secularism. China and Russia also have the same problem. But the coming down to religion, the use of religion in the evangelical church, which is part of the reason why I think the Black community is particularly intolerant, not only because of the slave issue, is distorted. There's one particular verse in Leviticus, which in a particular context things are said, which is used over and over again. In my opinion, devil using the scripture for his own purposes. So it is not at least from the biblical perspective, homosexuality not condemned as it is projected. There's one chapter, but it goes to a lot of far greater questions about how you view the Bible, how you interpret the Bible, and so on and so forth. And yeah, so that's the way I look at it.
I had one more thought. Anyone know anything about homosexuality among animals, animal behavior?
Oh, quite extensive. There's a lot of data on that, and different animals have different rates. It will take a while, but yes, it's quite extensive, and there are exclusively homosexual animals, and they vary by species, birds, mammals, and even amoebae can be homosexual.
Saro, I want to ask you a question. Your assertion that homosexuality is less tolerated in the Black community, is there data for that, or is that a prejudicial statement?
Yes, that's one of the
I think it is just a statement. I don't know any of the data, but that from everything I've kind of gathered, heard, seen, that's the opinion I've formed. And since I was reading this book, it's very in the forefront of my mind at the moment. It's called The Prophet, and so it's written by a Black, I think, homosexual author, and he goes into some of this stuff.
But can you imagine that if the whole humanity was only one sex? There wouldn't be humanity. They were produced, in a way that together they could produce a human being. That's a very
amazing. Then we'll have a males pregnant.
The pattern, somebody has planned it. So much of millions of sperms swimming around. I have a nice picture that one of my friends has made, and it is a movie. I will show it in the Sex 2. I think it is an amazing scientific work that makes human beings proliferate. Or not only human beings, anything. The whole reproduction is a very interesting feature that I believe is from God.
There is data on race and homosexuality, and certainly Asian and Black communities have very high rates. 90% of the LGBT individuals who were killed in the US were Black, and they were killed by people who knew them from the Black community. Mm-hmm. So the murder rates the hate crimes are very marked, and it varies by communities, but murders in countries like Pakistan are quite high.
Honor killings.
Yeah. No, it's we are evolving into it, and sometimes I think we are backsliding. But
okay.
Thank you, Maruf. So next talk, Lawrence, give a nice
title for it.
And we'll discuss gender and
the
homosexuality and gender dysphoria is another thing that is very interesting. I don't know the psychological bearings on that, and interesting to listen.
Yeah, okay, we'll try and cover it. It's a big topic. I'll have to leave out, say, the animal studies. But yes, okay, I'll have it for the next month or the month after, whenever.
Next month.
Next month, yeah.
So
Okay.
Mohan
Okay.
is not, can you get Mohan to give a little talk on his sporting career, his amazing sporting
Yeah,
career?
I will tell him. He just went back to the cricket match.
He prefers cricket to sex.
Yeah, I think since Gail is no longer there, he's no longer interested.
Yeah.
It is the 28th May, 28th,
Okay,
and I will send you the information.
okay. All right.
Okay, all right, all the
Thank
best.
you.
Thank you, folks. Thank you all.
Okay,
Thank you
bye.
all.
Thank
Take care.
Thank you,
Bye.
everyone.
Thank you. Thank you,
Bye.
everyone. Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks, Karunyan. Thank you.
Thanks,
Next
Arun,
month.
and very good
Okay.
talk.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank
And
you.
Very good.
can I say one thing? Apologies to Hillary because she must have prepared and we didn't hear from her. And so sincere apologies. Lawrence, pass on apologies to your
Okay.
wife. And we wait to hear from both of you as a husband and wife next month. Thank
Okay.
you.
Yeah,
Thank you.
thank you. Yes, Hilary, I'm sorry. Our timing was not very good, but it
Not to
was,
worry, she had other things
No
on.
problem.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay.
okay,
But
thank you.
the person to be blamed is Lawrence himself. So
We'll see you
Okay.
next month.
All right.
Okay,
Hey,
take
guys,
care.
goodbye.
Okay,
Okay,
bye.
bye.
Good
And
session.
Saro, we will all meet together in London when you come. Please give us a
Yeah,
call.
I hope so. I hope so. I'll send you guys an email and maybe some dates that are good for people. I think lots of people are not working, so maybe a weekday might be okay. I was thinking just for an afternoon tea or something. I'll try to organize something at where we're staying.
no problem.
Shanti, I'm at Marble Arch, so I think that's most people don't have a
Yeah.
problem getting there, I would think.
No problem at all.
No problem.
But
Thank you for that. We'll all meet
Okay.
together.
Thank you.
Okay, bye.
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 Bye. Thank you, Maharoof, again
Okay,
for the hard work.
I think we should get together and you organize this visit of Saro. You know,
Hmm.
I'm also here, so that's good. I'm here till the 15th. Hey, Bobby.